Mads.
Thanks.
So, Madigan, as you said, we're going to talk a little bit today about the first and foremost the State of Utilities report, which is some research that EnergyCAP performed just a couple of weeks ago here, pretty recently, and we're going to go through both of them shortly, the method of how we did that, and also some of the key findings. We have done a deep dive of this research previously, so we're not going to go as in depth into every single piece of it. But if you missed that, it's recorded, it's published on the website. It's actually really cool. And that was a little bit more of an academic look at the data and kind of dissecting it. Today, we're going to get a little more practical. So we're going to talk about that data, but also kind of the responses and then the goals and needs, and of course the challenges that underlie that data. And then in the latter half of the presentation, or the latter piece of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit more explicitly about EnergyCAP. So I'm so glad to see that we have customers in here. Please stay, but also know that the kind of the later portion is going to be a little bit more about EnergyCAP. So particularly for the folks who aren't EnergyCAP customers or want to know a little bit more about us as well. And then we're going to have just some super brief case studies to talk about, kind of real life examples of some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Sarah Uranowski. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at EnergyCAP. I'm also a mechanical engineer. I have 15 years of experience, both in front of and behind the meter, both in a technical and a technical marketing capacity. And I'm very happy, as always, to introduce you to Tom Diliberti, as if you don't know him. And Tom, please tell us about yourself.
Sarah, it's always hard following you, just with your pedigree and your time. But just a little bit about me for those who I haven't met. Yeah, I've been in the energy industry for 20 years. I've been using EnergyCAP during that period of time. And the thing you'll learn about me as you get to know me is I'm passionate about energy conservation and energy awareness, and really trying to help and support organizations to use the tools they need to just be as efficient as possible. So at the end of the day, that's what I really enjoy doing. And today's webinar, we're just going to be talking about a great tool and some of the data in the industry, just some information that hopefully will be helpful so you can connect the dots and see how important it is to get your data in one spot.
So, to do a brief overview of the study that we did, we put out a survey and almost perfectly half and half to EnergyCAP customers and then to external folks because we wanted to hear from people not just who use our tool every day, but who are managing energy in the trenches across industries, and then both with and without those more advanced energy management tools in their pockets. We had almost 200 separate individual organizations respond, again, split about half and half. We did a little bit of number crunching for averages and most common responses, things like that. But everything we're going to talk about today and everything that's available both in the report, which you can just directly download and read through, or if you go back to our deep dive webinar on the report and the findings, everything that we talk about is exactly what people reported. We didn't alter those responses. We didn't pick and choose them, whether they were complementary of energy management software like ours or not. It's all available. And I think that's really important because we all want to understand exactly what's going on in the energy management world right now. And to that end, we're going to summarize a little bit here with kind of the top 10 findings from the report. And no surprise, the number one finding across every industry, across every respondent, was increasing utility budgets and rising utility costs. And for more than 20% of folks, they actually reported double-digit increases across their utility portfolio. So 10% plus, not just a moderate increase. Interestingly, governments they reported the lowest increase. So 66% of governments, or two out of three, reported low to moderate increases versus those higher level, whereas healthcare and retail were some of the sectors that reported the most. So 90% plus of those industries are reporting not just overall increases, but they were far more likely than other industries to report that 10% plus. It's interesting too, I think, to note that for those industries, healthcare and especially when you get into retail, that maybe doesn't own their building, so they don't have control over that building, or food retail where there's really strict climate control, you have refrigeration running all the time, kind of those industries where it is harder to kind of pull those simple levers for energy management that they're also reporting the biggest increases. Maybe not a surprise, but a really interesting fact. And we're going to talk a little more about kind of the global and certainly the national trends uh, that are doing this and might be contributing as well. Given that, it's not a surprise at all that cost control is the number one goal, both across customers and non-customers, because everyone is feeling that pressure and that pain. So the number 2 and 3 goals got a little bit interesting. For non-customers, they then want to, of course, reduce or control total spend, but also improve budgets and forecasting, along with finding and fixing waste faster. For customers, they're looking to reduce usage intensity along with finding and fixing waste faster. So both groups are very aligned on the outcomes that they're looking for, but non-customers are still trying to build maybe a little bit of a stronger foundation and planning for reporting, where customers are looking at some of those maybe more advanced things like the biggest drivers of not just cost but consumption, which was really interesting. This, of course, ties back to forecasting confidence. So 40% of folks not super confident in those budget forecasts. And then, of course, KPIs as well, spend versus budget variance being top overall. So what are we predicting? Are we meeting it? How far off are we? Which tells you that utility management is very much being measured right now in financial terms and financial outcomes. So some interesting things there. Tom, will you take us through the other 5?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So number 6 on the list here is that 1 in 3 are not fully confident in their ability to hit their energy management goals. So our interpretation of that is, again, 1 in 3 people just feel like they don't have the tools, they don't have the data, they don't have the knowledge to really capture the savings that they recognize probably likely exists in their buildings. Number 7 is a lack of budget. And this comes as no surprise to anyone, right? That a lack of budget is the biggest blocker for many customers, that you need to have the resources in order to get things done. So non-customers cite needing better data as their biggest hurdle. And so again, this is the world that we live in here with EnergyCAP, knowing the importance of data and just having really good data in order to drive your decision making. 42% report a fully or mostly manual energy management approach. And I just want to pause on this for a second just to let you digest this. So what this is saying is that 4 in 10, more than 4 in 10 people are saying that a lot of the work that they do is manual. It's mostly manual. So the data they're trying to get, the processes they have are very arduous and take a lot of time. And so again, today, Sarah and I want to make a case for automating that or just finding a way to accelerate that so that you can get the outcomes that you're looking for. And finally, number 10 is that 70% of energy management teams are 6 people or fewer. Again, just giving you a moment of pause to think about that. So a lot of organizations who have energy management teams, they're not big teams because very likely they don't see the value in having bigger teams. There's not the return on investment to have the people and the resources and everything associated with that. Whereas 1 in 10, so 10%, are just literally a single person. So organizations feel like maybe it makes sense to have an energy management individual, but they don't want to allocate any more resources. But what's interesting, I think the stat here, Sarah, remind me if I get this wrong, but isn't it that we are EnergyCAP customers are 4 times more likely to have bigger teams than those who are not using this software, which means that when you have access to the data and you have the ability to disaggregate and understand what's out there, you see the benefit of having the resources because the savings becomes more evident. Is that
The
correct, Sarah?
other,
I don't know, misquote the stat. It was
yes.
4 times is often, correct?
Yep, you're correct. It's actually just a little bit over 4 times as likely. The other interesting thing about this stat is this was a cross-functional team. So not just fully dedicated energy managers or sustainability managers or whoever is actually doing the function, but the facilities folks, the finance folks, the leadership, the cross-functional team who might be dedicating part of, if not all of their time to energy management, which I think makes this stat even more meaningful, because if you're basically pulling every single person across your organization who has anything to do with energy management, for almost all teams, 70% of teams, that's six people at most. And for 1 in 10, it's just one. They're just a lone read, which
Yep.
I mean, teams are tight.
Yeah,
I'm amazed at our customers, at non-customers, just the sheer amount of progress that people make. I really am, and the dedication of folks and the passion they bring to energy management to move the mountains that they do with teams of that size.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, so I the next thing that we wanted to go through, Sarah and I wanted to just give you a sense of the market. So we have some slides we want to share about anticipated rates or rate forecasts, as well as some information about data centers. So let me start us with this, and Sarah, please jump in to help support these things. But Sarah had mentioned in one of the 10 important findings that 76% of the organizations are seeing steeply rising costs, and we've got the data to prove that, both what's happening in the industry as well as just doing the research to see what's forecasted. So this chart here, where we've got the map of the US just broken out by color in different regions, and what we've marked up here is what the forecasts are for rate increases in the coming years. And what's interesting about this data, in my opinion, is it changes. Everybody's going to see rate increases, but the reason why is different around the country. So let's just talk ourselves around this by starting in the Northwest, in the red states there, so the Northwest, Mountain West. So the way to interpret this data is the forecasts are to see rate increases of 12 to 18% in the next couple of years. And what moderates the rates here is electricity is primarily generated in these states through hydro. So it's water that's held behind a dam. And because for the most part, always have the water there, they can control the flow of water and they can moderate the rates. So it helps a little bit with not seeing as quite a volatile rate increases as other areas. But also in the Northwest, there's a data center boom and there's transmission congestion. So those are factors that are going to drive up rates a little bit more. In the middle part of the country, the purple states here, so the Midwest or Mid-Atlantic, here what we're seeing is rate increases expected to be in excess of 15%. And the reasons for that is the aging infrastructure. There's grid congestion. One of the other webinars I've done recently is I talked about how in the middle of the country, a lot of the electricity is created through solar and through wind, and it's getting that energy that's created out to where the populations are. And so that grid congestion is creating a problem, and it's also contributing to driving rates up. In the Northeast, here we have record high capacity. So prices are high. You've got data centers, you've got supply pressures. It's getting natural gas to the Northeast to burn it to create the electricity. That's going to impact rates, again, forecast to be 15 to 20%. Whereas in the South, here we've got some climate issues. So we've also got industrial growth taking place in the Southwest. And so we see rates a little bit lower here, 15% than what we see in the Northeast, but still we expect them to be significant. Texas, if you have your eyes caught to this, seems to have the lowest projected rates. And I think part of it has to do with just physically where Texas is, just the access to natural gas coming out of the ground, as well as Texas also has an awful lot of solar. It's surprising. It surprises many people to learn that just because of the politics and ultimately people just I tend to see don't anticipate that and don't guess that. But Texas actually has lower rates and very stable, more stable rates than others, and they're projected to be in the 8 to 12% range. And then finally finishing the cycle around the country here is talking about out west. Is here we see very dramatic rate increases planned. Part of this is due to the climate change and the wildfires that occurred over the last few years. So it's still the infrastructure they were suffering from that, and money's being spent to repair everything and get the systems fully operational and more able to overcome events in the future. And so there's just some rate increases that are happening as a result of that activity there as well. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything to add to that. I know sometimes I miss the thing here or there. Did you anything to add?
No, yeah, I think you've got it spot on. So the one interesting thing about Texas is also how they parcel, package, and sell energy. So Texas, in their policies, really favors Texans as they should because they have abundant energy. Now, the interesting flip side of that is it leaves a lot of power for not only peak demand charges, but other types of charges that providers and utilities there want to charge. So it's balances a little that even if their energy prices are low, that peak demand charges and other things, you really can get extra penalized for them, which again makes, first of all, knowing that those are happening really important, and then also having ways to control them. Whereas things like Tom, you talked a lot about wildfires. You have flooding and things like that in the South. There are things that are really sort of beyond the control of any individual ratepayer that ultimately in rate cases are going to be passed on to you as a customer, whether you're an individual homeowner or whether you're a very large business owner or anyone in between. So it's really important to understand. And actually, you have a really good webinar about understanding your bill and literally each individual line of your bill. But it becomes really critical to know what pieces do I have control over and what don't I? Because then you know which levers you can pull, and at least you understand, like peak demand charges. And then you understand, well, okay, there was a rate case for these charges because of the massive infrastructure that needs to be either upgraded or improved because of natural disasters, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what I would always coach people is you have some control. I say some
Mhm.
control over consumption and demand if you have the right systems in place and strategies to manage those things. But many times you have no control over rates. Those come downstream. But again, you do have some control over rate structures and learning about what those are and understanding the best tariff to be on. And so, to your point, Sarah, it's learning what you can control and really digging into it, and then recognize there's some things you can't control, and just try to manage that as best you can. So what I wanted to do next is jump into a discussion about data centers. This is always in the news right now. People are keenly aware of the data centers, and Sarah and I thought this graphic was just a nice way of capturing some of the anticipated growth over the next couple years. So I want to draw your attention to the legend in the right-hand side of this picture, the orange and the blue dot. I call this orange. Others might call it yellow, but I just
Actually,
want
I think it's
to.
I think it's actually orange, yeah. It's
Okay,
like
we'll
a
go with orange.
wildflower orange.
Yeah, and some might even call it gold. So if we
Mhm.
kind of skip over that and just kind of accept that it's orange. But if you notice there on the right-hand side again, these are data centers that we expect to be operating in this year. And so these orange dots that litter the diagram that go around the US, the size of the dot is representative of the size of the data center or the load that's expected to come online in 2026. And likewise, the blue dots are similar for 2027. So again, the bigger the dot represents the bigger load. This represents 30 gigawatts of load that's expected to come online. And I know a lot of people have seen this in the news, and there's fear, and there's certainly a lot of activity about people concerned that this is going to be affecting their rates. They don't want it in their backyard. There's been a lot of political pushback, and people really hesitant. And what's interesting about this data is of these 16 dots that are on the graph, 6 of these are expected to have their own on-site generation. And so I think what we're beginning to see is industry, and I just kind of say that in quotations, just because there's many, businesses and industry that's got a vested interest in this, that they want to take a bigger bite out of the apple, if you will, or they want to take a role in both trying to protect themselves by managing their own electricity, their own load, as well as paying some of the investment costs, some or all of those. And so this is the way it currently stands. And boy, I think if we were to check this a month from now or 2 months from now, it's going to be dynamic. It's going to change because I think it's just the state of flux that we're in within the industry. But at least this gives you a snapshot at this point in time. And this the second graphic is similar to the first one, but just a different way of looking at it. Draw your attention to the top of this diagram here, where you have a gradient of color. So the darker the color represents a bigger portion of the electricity in these states would be dedicated or allocated to the data centers. So let's talk about the darkest one. Let's talk about Virginia. So what this is saying is that by 2030, more than 30% of the electricity generated in the state of Virginia will be used to satisfy the need of data centers, which is profound to think about that and how it really stands out from the others. And so the next darkest state is going to be North Dakota. There, it's more than 20% is forecasted to be. Then you've got the series of states going to the middle of the country out to Oregon, where it's more than 10% of their electricity is going to be dedicated to serving data centers. And then maybe the other anomaly in the picture is just those handful of states that are really don't have any shading at all. So there's no expected electricity being dedicated to data centers. So that's going to involve Vermont. It looks like Delaware sneaks in there on the East Coast. We've got West Virginia, Missouri, and Arkansas, and then Alaska. So again, the intent here as we get into this part of the webinar over the last few minutes was to just give you a state of the industry, talking about rates, talking about data centers, because this has been in the news, just so that you have an awareness of where that sits.
And Tom, will you talk a little bit about, so I know with all of this sort of buzz around data centers and AI and things like that, it might seem like those handful of dots are small or like, oh, I didn't know that it was so few of data centers. And I know that those are the ones that are for sure that are being executed and actively either in construction or approved to go into construction. But I feel like on the other side, there's this panic that they're going to land everywhere and be everywhere. And I know in some of your research, you found that as neighborhoods and areas have and governments, local governments have started to be a little more careful, that one thing that's happening is that maybe they're looking at multiple locations. But can you talk a little more about that? Because that's something that
Yeah.
I found really interesting.
Yeah, so one of the things that has happened over time is I've learned myself is it seems as though these businesses, these companies that want these data centers, because of the politics, they want to, I'll say, hedge their bet a little bit. They don't want to lock in and say we for sure want to build in this particular location, knowing that they might run aground there. They might not be able to get what they want. So what's happened and what the studies seem to suggest, the data is that organizations, these companies have submitted to build in multiple locations with the intent of really only finding the best location, but knowing that they might not get their choice because they might get, for simple language, they might get shooed away or the politics might steer them away. And so to maybe restate that is there has been redundant counting with some of the data center statistics because these organizations, these businesses are not sure where they can build based on the politics, the infrastructure, and everything else. And it's just interesting because I have seen some reports that contradict others where they talk about these really big loads that are anticipated to come on, and then you read the next and they say, well, that might be overcounted a little bit. And so that just gives you a little bit more background on what, when you read these statistics and maybe a month or two later you see something else in the news. I don't think it's intentionally contradictory or somebody's trying to pull the wool over your eyes, but it's a dynamic that's happening now in the industry.
So, speaking of politics and things getting pushed back, benchmarking rules are something they're a subject that I really like to talk about and I keep up with. This is the latest and greatest map from IMT, which is a great resource if you track these kinds of things. But benchmarking rules are definitely spreading nationwide. They have been for a while. And this map kind of shows how broad and diverse that landscape can be. There are now eight states that have nationwide commercial benchmarking or building and energy transparency laws, but there are dozens and dozens of cities, counties, local laws, such that now more than 70% of states have at least some kind of law somewhere on the books. And benchmarking is sort of the gateway. It's that initial baseline that is then used for broader policies and sort of the base layer that comes before things like emissions compliance or building performance laws, also known as BPS, where you're actually looking at, okay, how much energy and emissions and shrinking that actively over time. So California has been in the news quite a bit for this. They passed a couple of laws, SB 253 and 261. And those cover both scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions disclosure, and also the sort of more nebulous or seemingly nebulous climate related financial disclosure reporting. So they are in court cases right now. SB 253 remains in effect. And the first due date for scope 1 and 2 disclosures for this year is August 10th. That applies to anyone who does business, any corporation or any entity that's doing business in California over $1 billion in revenue, which is quite a number of global companies. The remainder is actually in it's stayed, it's in effect, but it's considered stayed as the legislation winds its way through challenges in the Ninth Circuit courts. Interestingly, New York City, or I'm sorry, New York as a state, New York City has long had benchmarking and BPS laws on the books, but New York State has established disclosure proposals and have put those forth that are modeled on California's laws. And those are moving steadily through the legislature. They've been approved. The governor's signature is expected on those. Now, they don't start until the 2027-2028 timeframe, but it's sort of an interesting domino that with California kind of at the front, and now that there's a model, other states and governments are really looking closely at the court challenges, where they're challenging, what can be done to sort of tighten some of that up for other states. I think that we're going to see additional legislation statewide around some of these things, which is really interesting. Other final note is Energy Star. There's been quite a lot of chat about whether they were funded, where are they living. There were some proposals by the current federal administration to potentially say goodbye to Energy Star. Energy Star did find a new home now with the DOE. It is fully funded, and Energy Star portfolio manager remains very active, which is from our perspective a wonderful thing. So
Amen.
just a little
Yep.
bit of what's going on, yep, legislatively. And so we've talked about, kind of what's going on and what the survey shows, what's going on in the ether in the world right now. And I really think that like my biggest takeaway from the survey was not that organizations need to put in more effort, that they need to try harder, or that they need people who are more dedicated. All of that is there. And really and they don't even really need more data. The data exists. They just need it to be better, tighter, more accessible, their workflows easier to handle, and kind of the right tools to do this. So this is kind of the bridge of how that happens. So everyone wants cost control, right? And waste reduction and those kinds of things. But you need not only the data, but to use the data to do that. So, and we get to brag a little bit about EnergyCAP in this presentation, which we don't always do. So I really feel like this is where EnergyCAP capabilities. And these are just a few, Tom and I could literally sit here and wax poetic about all the great things about EnergyCAP for an hour. But I don't know that all of you want to listen to us do that. So I picked just a couple, or we picked just a couple that we want to talk about. But for the opportunities to save, right, things like interval data, certainly your bill audits, benchmarking, all of those things that are going to help you spot errors that are really hard to see when you're doing things manually, or spot areas of waste, and then just identify those cost drivers so you can start to take steps to proactively stop that bleed is really going to be helpful. And for finding and fixing waste, again, interval data very much on that list. What's going on in moment to moment, not month to month or year to year, quarter to quarter. Definitely demand and usage visibility, and EnergyCAP Watts AI is, we've used AI in a lot of different ways for a really long time, but we now have AI that can stay with you through the software, and you can ask conversational questions. There's lots of other capabilities that Watts has, but that's really not only a time saver, but when you're positioning to identify those outliers and those unusual patterns. And, doing more with less, like we hear a lot about, and Tom, you're going to talk a little more about blockers, but basically lack of time, lack of budget for folks who don't have EnergyCAP. They were, again, far more likely to report those smaller teams. So lack of people to do it at all. And that's a functional blocker. It's not just like a staff issue. It's a blocker to effectiveness. So I really do feel like bill capture, if there's sort of one thing in addition to core EnergyCAP that I would recommend to save yourself a lot of time, a lot of errors, a lot of hassle, it would be bill capture. And then of course, Watts AI there as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about stuff for finance as we go, but I really do believe that EnergyCAP is unique in our focus on finance and tools for finance. And it's really critical when you're doing forecasting, whether you do it with EnergyCAP or not. If you're doing it on your own, also totally fine. But no matter how you're doing it, no matter how you're looking at budgeting and forecasting and trying to predict what will happen based on the past, that it's not just based on the past, that it's not just based on, whatever last year and we tack a percentage on and we're just going to say that we're good. So you need normalized data and websites, free websites like Weather Data Depot can help you there, but you also need to account for not just weather, but your location. What's happening not just with your utility bills, but with your buildings? What has changed about your buildings over time, even if it's literally nothing other than that they're older and probably slightly less efficient than they were? Or if you're an energy manager with lots of resources and they're getting better and better, that also really materially matters. So you want to make sure that your budgeting is really accurate, which is why it's one of the big needs. And I really feel like that's a place for EnergyCAP certainly to lean in and help you. But it's somewhere if you have the time and can save that time other places to lean in yourself as well, even if you don't have EnergyCAP as a tool. And then finally, just aligning everybody, right? So aligning certainly around the financial insights, and then taking those for facilities, for energy management, for sustainability, for compliance, like we just talked about, and things like our unique data tree, which makes it really easy for folks to use the same data set, but only for the stuff that they need it for, and dashboards and sharing reports and things like that. And then finally, KPIs. So when you've got usage and cost that live side by side and you can slice it and dice it all of those different ways, that's going to be really helpful. So, takeaway from this slide is the needs, I think, of energy teams, the needs that are stated in that survey are practical. There are things like better visibility, not more data necessarily, but better data, less manual work, stronger alignment, those kinds of things. And that is what EnergyCAP is built to support.
Yeah, very good, Sarah. So thanks for helping us understand that. And what I want to do is talk about some of the blockers that came out of the survey results we have. So, well, what I want to talk about for a couple minutes here is just we're under the theme or the context of energy management. What's causing it to become more difficult? So starting over here on the left, so 29% of all respondents don't have the time, staff, or budget they need in order to m meet their goals with energy management. Again, this doesn't come as a surprise, right? It's hard to get work done if you don't have the tools that you need in order to get it done. And so the pain points is that the audit processes are reactive and scattered, meaning that as you try to audit data or you're trying to look at your utility data, it's manual, it's slow, it's clumsy, and it just doesn't afford you the ability to get it done quickly and ultimately focus your energy on something that's going to serve your purposes faster. So with poor data, it's hard to monitor your savings projects. So let's suppose you're doing some type of lighting retrofit as a, for instance, if you don't have good data to measure it, to understand it and quantify it and then share it, it tends to stall. And it also doesn't, the flip side of that, it doesn't allow you to build momentum for the next one. The third thing here is the billing errors going unaddressed. So if you don't find those billing errors, or there's late fees, all of those things are going to prevent you from getting to where you want to be. And a huge one in this column here is that the tribal knowledge is going away.
Yes.
So many of the people I talk to in the industry, their biggest fear is losing people within their organization that have that tribal knowledge and trying to find a way to capture it before people retire or leave the organization. So it contributes to blocking the process of doing better energy management. And now going through the second column here. So 40% of non-EnergyCAP customers, they need more data. So they're saying, boy, I really, if I had more data, I'd be able to understand better what's happening. But the data, well, it many times exists, but it's not centralized or normalized and or trusted. And so people just don't feel comfortable relying on it in order to make those decisions. And then teams get stuck in Excel, and we've all been there before at different stages of our careers. I'm sure we're using documents, and it could be better, or you have trust issues. It's like, has anybody else modified this format, or all the formulas following across rows and columns? Am I really getting a true glimpse of what the data is showing? So we've been there. We understand that it becomes a challenge when trying to take that next step. Another thing that happens if you don't trust your data and you're not staying on top of with regularity, it's hard to offer that information to leadership. So if somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I need a report on this," or "Tell us how we're doing here," if you don't have it all centralized and you don't have it in a spot that you can trust, it just takes time to produce those reports. So it's clumsy, it becomes a fire drill. It becomes hard to pull off. And the last item here in this column is the sub-meter data many times is not next to the utility data. So you might have the data you need, but it's disjointed. It's hard to see the comparisons between your utility bills and the real-time data. And so having that in one pane of glass would make things an awful lot easier to understand. Again, it becomes a blocker to making progress. And then find this last column here where 22% aren't aligned across teams. So people might have the data, but it's siloed. So the finance, the sustainability, the ops teams, they don't share the data because maybe somebody owns it and somebody else isn't great at sharing it, or it doesn't get updated regularly. And ultimately, it becomes difficult to get work done because all your teams aren't aligned with what they're trying to achieve. Another thing that happens when you do that, just one quick comment, is when you do finally have the wins, they don't get documented. It's back to what I said a few minutes ago about if you don't tell the story of success, then you're going to have problems building momentum in order to have more success. So at the end of the day, these are the things that have the common themes that go across the different organizations. And again, that's what Sarah and I are trying to unpack is what do people really need in order to elevate their organizations?
So, Tom, I think you did a really good job of summarizing some of the overall blockers, certainly that were surfaced by the survey. But we see these, and I think you've seen probably more than anybody firsthand as an energy manager in the field for many years. But we also see and hear about them from customers, from other energy managers, folks that we interact with in reality, and what that really means for organizations. So wanted to chat through just a couple, and I'm going to go through them quickly. But Amy, I'm going to shout you out on this one because Amy actually told this story and this one at Catalyst last year, and we're so glad that she was there. But siloed data, right? So siloed, it's not that the data isn't there or doesn't exist. It's that it lives a lot of places. Tom, kind of to your point about if all of your energy is going towards getting it into a spreadsheet, hoping and trying to make sure that that spreadsheet is accurate, and then turning around and saying, I really need to get these couple of insights out because I'm being asked for them right now. It can be really hard to take those next steps into digging in, seeing where those errors and issues are. So, City of Baltimore, when they first came to us, they imported a lot of their historical data, and a really simple report that we recommend running showed that there were a whole lot of accounts that didn't have any usage. And Amy, you and your team worked hard to confirm that those were correct. That basically agency by agency that there truly was inactive meters or closed accounts, things like that, and there were substantial savings from that because when you centralize that data, then you can act on it. And Tom, I think this goes to something that you say a lot, which is that you can't fix what you can't see. So,
Absolutely.
that's sort of the core of everything. And
Absolutely.
then once you can see it, make sure that it's accurate. So, fun fact, in 2024, a university in Hong Kong did a study, and they found that 94% of spreadsheets that were used in business decision making, so not, sort of academic research or not abstract research, but they looked at 10 years of technical and business journal research and business articles, and they reviewed the quality of the spreadsheet data therein and found that the actual data that, and these were like the best, the happiest statistics because these were case studies and things where businesses had used that data to make really critical decisions. And they found that 94% of them contained errors, like functional, meaningful errors. And they did some additional study and found, and this is probably not surprising, but confirmation bias, you want to go and make sure that you don't just think something, but you study it and it is proven true or false. That when folks went back after the fact and tried to fix those errors, that it was more costly and it was much more risky than if they had gotten them right in the first place. And actually, when they went back to try to fix them, sometimes the data was worse after the fact. So when you're hand keying bills or you're spending all of your time like trying to get all that data gathered in the first place, it's going to be error prone. And instead, when you've got automatic audits that are running and making sure, even if you've hand keyed that bill in, making sure that AI and other things, energy experts are looking at the data and flagging, hey, something's not right here. When you have that, you're going to have much better outcomes, including for UC San Diego. They were able to find, identify, and correct $1 million billing mistake. So it's not just the visibility piece, although that's really important. It's the ability to act as well. And then finally, ROI. And I bring this one up because it's not just, I don't think, ROI of tools or how you justify the things that you want, right? Whether it's energy management software, whether it's new equipment because you just know that the deferred maintenance and all these other things have made this an untenable situation. So it's not just sort of those asks. But one thing that, Tom, I think you and I have both heard are the pressure to prove your worth as a team and as an energy manager and someone who does that kind of work. That if they're looking to cut budget, you don't want it not only to be yours for your tools, but for your team and your position. So it's really important to be able to show and prove that ROI. And small energy teams aren't thinking like, what I really need is centralized data and a shiny new utility bill management tool. Like they're not thinking about that. They're thinking I need faster reporting or analysis or stronger business cases or my leadership needs these results. And there's data that's underlying all of that. And when you have that information, it doesn't just help you to get those answers quickly, but to make the business case for your tools, but also for yourself. And what
Yeah,
has to underlie that is good data. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Sarah, as I've trained energy managers, one of the first things I taught them as I work with them is that that their position typically is always at risk because people are always looking at the bottom line. And so they see the cost of an individual doing a job. And because people making those decisions aren't in the field and don't understand the work necessarily, the job is just one that seems to be at risk more times than not. And I've always urged people to get the data, keep lists, document all of the wonderful things that energy manager is doing to help their organization. So if they are ever at risk, they have the ammunition to fight back a little bit and defend all the good work that they do.
Agreed. And Tom, talk about a little bit what good data. We talked, I think, a lot. Maybe I talked a lot about bad data. Talk about good data.
Yeah, well, the elements that good data has. So this is coming from the organizations, both in our survey, the results in the survey, as well as just the conversations I've had, Sarah's had, just our organization has had with clients and prospects through the years. What do people want? Well, it falls into these four categories. People want centralized data. People more and more want the data to be automated. Organizations seem to be transitioning right now from doing a lot of the work manually themselves over time. I would say in the last 10 years, what I've seen is more and more organizations want to offload that responsibility. So they want to find a partner that can automate the process, ingest the data, audit it, validate it, and get it into the system. It needs to be visible so people can see it with regularity. That means dashboards. That means comparing different types of data together so they can be studied. And then finally, it's got to be integrated. So it's carbon accounting, it's interval data, it's benchmarking reporting. It's all got to come together under one umbrella. So it's these four elements. It's centralized, automated, visible, and integrated. These are the things that create problems if you don't have it. And these are the elements that really help people to achieve good things with the data when they do have it. So let's talk about the different teams within an organization. So what we have in this slide is the idea that our different teams are trying to get different things accomplished within the organizations. So over on the left-hand side, you see the facilities and operations team where they're focused on comfort and safety. They're trying to keep the buildings working properly and everybody doing their jobs. And what they need from software or what they need from tools is they need to find where the issues are so they can flag performance issues and fix things. They need to be able to have the data to prioritize capital projects, and they need to make sure they have the resources for managing resources, right? For the buildings and the spaces and what's being utilized in that particular organization. Where sustainability officers here, their primarily goal is compliance and regulation as well as goal setting and tracking. So they're working in a similar way to the facilities team with similar data many times, but their outcomes and their goals are a little bit different. So they want the data to do emissions reporting or set baselines and track progress because they might have annual reports that are due or they're doing some type of compliance reporting. Whereas finance teams, I mean, that's for them, it's about budgets, right? It's about making sure that we're on budget. They're making sure the organization's complying with all their tax law and all their legal obligations. So their focus, although they want to save money, they want to be on budget, and their slant or their day-to-day operations don't overlap necessarily directly with sustainability officers or the operations team. Whereas energy managers many times become the bridge to all of these because they seem to have a foot in the different areas where they're working with facilities and finance and sustainability to manage the buildings in ways that can improve operation, hopefully make things even more comfortable, save money, and connect everybody. And so what we need to recognize here is you need to have something that connects all the teams because it's really the same data. People are trying to get different things accomplished with the same data. And what EnergyCAP does is it brings the data into one place so that it can be answers for everyone. What Sarah and I want to do next is just go through a couple quick slides, just showing you a little bit about EnergyCAP. And if you're not an EnergyCAP user, just some of the nice features that exist within the software. And the first thing that I'm trying to highlight here is what we call the data hierarchy. So it's represented in the image on the right-hand side. These purple icons give the user a way to organize their information and match whatever the circumstances are. Maybe the best example might be a campus or a university campus where you have the campus itself and you have different buildings within the campus or colleges in the campus. And ultimately, you have a hierarchy that makes sense to your organization and you want to track your data in a way that matches that hierarchy. EnergyCAP affords you that ability all the way down to the meter level. And that's what's shown here under Discovery Drive. So you have all these meters attached to a site or to a building within a hierarchy of your organization. So it's a very powerful feature that many people really appreciate about EnergyCAP is you get to make it your own and something that matches how you want to think and how you've really been thinking over the course of years for how your organization has evolved. The other thing that this does is you can drill in and see some of the data, like the second bullet point. You can drill into your portfolio to see some of the data. And also AI or Watts, our tool, can help answer questions about your data just by poking around and asking some questions and bringing that data to you. So Sarah, the next one, I know we're starting a little bit tight on time too. So this image here is just an image of interval data. So this idea of taking your real-time data and putting it under the same umbrella, the same pane of glass as your utility data that allows you to look at the performance of buildings. This image here is just simply showing the load profile over the course of time and comparing that in the green region is to what is normal. And the black line going across is what's happening in essence now. And so it's allowing you to see when you're out of normal and when you can take action in order to resolve some issue. So the next slide, Sarah.
Yeah, so I'll briefly go over just the last couple of EnergyCAP things that we wanted to kind of talk through today, and that's bill audits. And as you can see, this is our own stat. The 1 in 5 is an EnergyCAP stat pulled truly from our own data. And now that doesn't mean that 1 out of 5 utility bills it has an error that's necessarily going to save you, millions of dollars. There are still quite a lot of those. I think it's don't quote me, but I think it's 1 out of 7 or 1 out of 8 that are actual cost errors, which is still a substantial amount. But it's that clean data. It's all those other things that we've already talked about. So bill audits might not be they might not be the most exciting. AI is interesting. It's exciting, even if it's a little scary to some people. It's really interesting. And bill audits are sort of like just a solid standby and really critical function because the value there is not only cost control, but confidence and speed. So it's your time isn't going to magically double or triple, but if you are able to get that information into a centralized platform that's automatically pulling those audits, then instead of doing the work literally just to get that data up and running and try to pull some insights from it, hopefully you can spend the time finding out, okay, this has automatically surfaced for me unusual use, cost demand, a potential missing bill, massive late fees. I'm concerned about that. Those kinds of things, like the really actionable things that are going to save you money, and you get to focus on that instead of pulling that data together. And you know what? We've been using AI for a long time. I know there's a lot of buzz around it now, but we've been using it in order and things like machine learning that have been around a long time to audit bills to surface those issues and errors. And it's something that we really stand by and have done for a long time and continue to do more and better. And then finally, finance tools. I've said this before, I'll say it again. I really think EnergyCAP is unique on our focus on finance. So, Tom, you talked, I think, really, really well about kind of the differences and what's important to different teams. And it's just good to know that, like, how do I speak and what terms and KPIs do I use that are going to be valuable and important to others as I'm trying to get what I need and get my points across. And I think for finance, it's control and auditability. So it's that trust, control, and that things are going to be consistent and there's not a lot of surprises. And again, we've kind of talked about budgeting and other things, but there are also parts like how you're integrating with your other systems, how you're breaking out charges for whether it's different departments or different buildings or tenants and those kinds of things. There's a whole lot of area to introduce risk into finance when you have the right tools to manage that risk really minimizes in a way that's really meaningful. And then finally, again, if I had one thing that I said, if you're considering EnergyCAP or you have it and you don't have bill capture, that I really feel is a strong saver of your time and your effort. It's bill capture, which is our bespoke bill processing service where we collect and enter all those bills on your behalf. And then, of course, we also have a suite of services if you want to go even further to review and manage bill flags, to even pay your bills, all those kinds of things. So there's even more that you can hand off to save, not only to maximize savings opportunities, but your own time, your very valuable time and effort. And Tom, this is my favorite one to talk about this.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry. Or
yeah.
anything else.
So Sarah and I always like to finish up the presentations with this graphic because we both like it so much. It's what we call our savings maturity model, and what it represents is how many of the EnergyCAP clients end up using the software in different ways to drive savings over the course of time. So if you start on the left-hand side, what many do is they start with the utility bill management piece of our software. They identify those bill areas and they see some savings. Then they see great value in automating the data. So they start to maybe up the services or they use bill capture. They start to see that, boy, if I can automate processes, there's a benefit and boom, more savings happens. Then they start to use more of the tools to detect problems and correct things. And I always tell people if you can't shut it off, set it back. And if you can't set it back, tune it up. So just words to live by in the field where you got to spend some time in your buildings and understand what's not working properly and get it fixed where you can and just become as efficient as possible. But then you streamline the financials or you comply in your report. You just have more conduits or ways to share information with your organization, and all of that drives savings over the course of time. So it's certainly not uncommon for EnergyCAP customers to make use of more and more tools over the course of time. And in the process, it just keeps getting better and better, and they keep seeing more and more savings. And we just celebrate that all the time because we just think, that's what we want to do is we want to help our customers just get the most out of what we can provide for them. So as we round out, just wanted to make you aware of a couple upcoming webinars. So we have a webinar in a couple weeks. We want to talk a little bit about Earth Day that happens the week before, a little bit of the history of Earth Day, and just what are you going to do now? Now that Earth Day is come and gone by the end of April, how do you take some of that good sentiment about the effort to make the planet better? Let's turn it into action and start to do more with the concept of Earth Day and just doing more. And then we want to come back in May and June with a follow-up to a series that I've been running. So parts 5 and 6 are in the next couple months of May and June, where we're going to take a look at some HVAC stuff for those people who need some support with understanding more about how HVAC is supposed to operate. and also with building automation in the month of June. So I wanted to spend some time hopefully teaching and informing people about those topics in the next couple months.
Mads, number one, do we have any questions? Oh, literally on the next slide. And I'm the one controlling the slides also, so I should know that. Um, and anything else you want to add here at the end?
Yeah, right. We have a few questions in the chat, but before that, if you want to speak to somebody on the EnergyCAP team, I just put a poll up. Please hit yes if you would like to. There's some other options. No is okay. I'm already a customer. We have a lot of customers on this webinar as well. So we'd love to see your friendly names. One question that we had was, do we have increases broken out by regions?
Oh,
This was towards the beginning of
Yeah,
the webinar.
was
yeah.
that for the utilities? Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
I believe so.
Yeah, Sarah, what I think we do is refer them back to our website, to the tool we have there. If you're interested in learning more about your region, we have an interactive tool on our website that allows an individual to log in and poke around wherever you're at. Suppose you are in an organization with multiple states, you can see the rate increases that are anticipated in multiple states based on, it looks like Madigan, you probably put a link to the
Hmm.
tool in the
Yep.
chat there. But that I think may answer this particular individual's question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And also, if you're interested in, we've had a couple of folks ask to use the map with the increases just sort of by region. If you're interested in that map, you can always certainly pull it from the slides. That was something we built internally that's based on the most recent EIA data. So I'm happy to explain. We have a standard blurb about how that was produced with links to the sources for that if you need it. And please, by all means, feel free to steal it or utilize it in your own presentations, your own work.
Right. Does anyone have any other questions? So whether you put it in the chat or Q&A, that would be great.
If not, Tom, I have one for you.
Uh-oh, bring it.
But I want to defer to others who are in the webinar and have been talking for an hour, like you and I.
So
Matt,
to
can I
say, if you
ask
want to,
it? Yeah.
yeah, ask it, and then we can give some of the participants the chance to ask if they have any.
Yeah. So, Tom, one thing, there's actually a quote from you, and I have a couple of versions. We have a few versions of the energy steps slide, and one actually includes the quote because I like it so much. But you were on this webinar, so it felt a little weird to also include a quote from you. But one thing that you often say is it's really that sort of beautiful trifecta, not just of the tool, but of the right projects and an energy management culture. And EnergyCAP's a fantastic tool. There are also lots of other tools, but it's not going to change magically a culture. And what's some advice or some thoughts that you have for folks on building a true energy management culture?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah, for the question. And I think it starts by just not ignoring it, quite frankly. Is I think sometimes in this, I'll say this just because it's been my life experience, and then there's truth to this, but also I tease a little bit too. But many times I work with people that are the engineering brains, and I know Sarah, you're one of them. You know, people that are real technical. And I think because of people's knowledge of science and technical solutions, people begin to lean on those almost too heavily. They assume that technology is going to fix every problem. And there's some truth to that. Technology can be a big part of the solution, but what they disregard, which is kind of the root of your question, is it's the culture piece or it's the human piece of that. And that's what I just want to bring people back to, is that at the end of the day, regardless of what type of technology you have, there's still a human being that's choosing to run it a certain way. So a human being is making decisions. And so it's about that person's belief and their strategies for how they want to operate that equipment. And I think, Sarah, that's the core of what your question is. I would just really want to encourage you to look at your culture, look at the people that are making these decisions, and elevate them, get them the training they need and the understanding. Because if you take the time initially to do that, you reap significant benefits down the road as people all get on the same page and are trying to achieve the same mission.
Good thought. It's a good thought to end on. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah.
Yes. I do not see any other questions. So I think we are good to wrap up. Again, this recording will be sent out, so you can feel free to rewatch or forward. But but thank you so much for everyone who joined today.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Hope everybody has a
Thanks,
wonderful
so.
day. Take care,
Thank you,
ladies. We'll see you.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.